Rebecca of Pocketful of Posies. Today, I would like to answer some fairly common questions about plus size costuming, getting started in plus size costuming, and also offer some tips and tricks that I have found useful since I started historical costuming. So, whether you consider yourself plus size or curvy or generously proportioned or just a little bit of extra, I have some tips and tricks for you. So stay tuned, here we go. So to begin with, just a little background about me and my sewing journey. I hated sewing, absolutely detested it. I took home ec in high school back in the 90s and I absolutely hated it. It was a dreadful experience. I didn't want to sew. I think I just didn't want someone to tell me what to sew, but I had absolutely no interest in it at all. When I first started sewing, I actually started with Barbie clothes. I had a much younger sister, and I started sewing clothes for her Barbies, and I decided to do all of the costumes from the Phantom of the Opera for her Barbies so she could act it out with them. That was more of what I wanted to do when I was a kid. I don't know that she ever actually wanted to do that, but anyway, so I did that, and so doing that actually helped me. It helped me gain a lot of skills because I was following patterns. I was learning how garments were put together, even if they were teeny tiny. And back then I did everything with hand sewing because I didn't have a sewing machine. Actually, the first sewing project that I did for myself to wear myself was a Halloween costume, and that was only back 8 years ago, I think. So I haven't been, I guess, sewing my whole life or anything like that. I came into it kind of gradually after hating it for so long and then embracing it, and I've been loving it ever since. I've never been particularly concerned about whether I would look terrible in a costume that I made or anything like that. I have never expected to look like a thin person in the same type of costume, and it's not like knowing your limitations. I wouldn't call it that, but you know, knowing that my proportions are not the same as someone with a 22-inch waist or a 25-inch waist or something like that. So that was really never a concern for me. But I understand how it is a concern for some people. And so learning how to make costumes or make garments that you feel good wearing is a really exciting journey to begin. The fear of cutting is a big one. Cutting into your actual fashion fabric. I had a lot of fear cutting into this fabric because this was the first time I'd actually spent a lot of money on actual real silk for a costume, and I was really scared when I made that first cut. But what helped was I made a mock-up of the bodice first out of really cheap fabric. And so having that first helped me not be as afraid cutting. I was still afraid, but it helped me with that. Because when you make a mock-up, and I will say that I hate making mock-ups because sometimes when I make the mock-up, when I'm done with it, I'm like, I don't want to sew this whole thing again, you know? I already did it. But they are really, really helpful, especially if you know you're going to have fitting issues. Now, I have only made one garment in all of the things I've sewn that I didn't have to make any fit adjustments to. And so I am generally, even in the patterns that go up to larger sizes, unlike the big three, generally in those patterns, in the smaller company patterns or the more historical garment patterns, they will have the larger sizes, but I'm usually bigger than those largest sizes anyway. So I have learned through trial and error mostly where I need to make adjustments. For me, it's always right in here because this is where I'm biggest. My bust is not very big compared to my waist and stomach, so I generally have to do an adjustment there, and a lot of times that involves making a mock-up first, but tracing out the pattern, making a cut so I have more width through here and the bust stays relatively the same. So most of the time, if you're going to have a fit issue with a costume, it's going to be in bodice. That's just, skirts tend to be more forgiving because you're generally in historical costumes, you're using a lot of yardage for your skirts. So you have a little bit more wiggle room with the fit. Bodices generally need to be more fitted, so that's where making a mock-up is going to help the absolute most. Some of the best advice that I can give with getting started with sewing, if are just getting started with historical costuming, is just do the thing. Noelle of Costuming Drama says that a lot. Just do the thing. Even if you use cheap fabric, even if you use, quilting cotton to make something, just do something. Get started. I would suggest always starting small. Start with the undergarments, start with the accessories, make yourself a pair of pockets, because then if you're not used to following patterns, there's my pocket. If you're not used to following patterns or that kind of thing, that can help ease you into sewing more complex garments. Start with pockets, start with a chemise or a shift. Start small, and that will really help you out. So historically speaking, small women and large women wore the same garments. Nothing really different. They wore the same undergarments, they wore the same overgarments. There have always been beauty ideals, whether those are from paintings or photographs or whatever, statues. There have always been beauty ideals. So historically speaking, especially, for example, the 18th century, like what I'm wearing right now, all of the undergarments are designed to give you a fashionable silhouette, to make your waist look smaller or make your front look flatter, that kind of thing. So underneath this dress, I have a shift, a petticoat, a bum roll, and pockets, and stays. And so the bum roll especially was designed to make your waist look smaller, even if you were not possessed of a small waist. So everyone didn't run around with teeny tiny waists. There were, all sizes represented all throughout history. Fashion changed for all types in the 20th century. The 20s, that straight, streamlined silhouette with the flapper dresses, if you want to call them that, the low-waisted dresses, and the being quite thin, started becoming more of a thing throughout the 20th century. But again, they wore undergarments to accentuate their waists. Like in the 50s, they wore waist cinchers. And they had those big skirts and their waists looked tiny, even if their waists weren't actually teeny tiny. It's kind of a fallacy to believe that women were all much smaller long ago. Maybe some of them were, and maybe some of them tight-laced to give themselves those teeny tiny waists in the Victorian era, but that wasn't your everyday average human being. I'm always super hot. It doesn't matter what I'm wearing. I will say though that I'm not hotter wearing all of this than I would be in a modern garment. And that's because modern garments are made of plastic and they don't breathe. Whereas all of my underlayers that I'm wearing are cotton or linen or things that breathe. I think all of my undergarments are cotton right now. But linen, especially for chemises and shifts and petticoats and things like that, the undergarments were designed to wick moisture away from your body to protect your outer garments, because these did not get washed as much. At least in the wealthier people, when they were wearing the silks and all of that, these garments were not washed. Your everyday average human being who maybe worked for a living, their clothing would be made out of linen or wool or things that still breathe, that could be washed. But your undergarments would be washed the most. So those had to be sturdy, breathable, and useful. I would say no, because if you want to have the correct silhouette in any given time period, you need the undergarments to give you that silhouette. You're not going to get the silhouette just wearing the dress. You need the stays or the corset. You need the chemise. You need the bum pad or the bustle. You need all of those undergarments to support the outer garment. So no, sorry, you can't say, well, I'm just gonna wear the dress and the petticoat and be done with it. Then it wouldn't look right. You wouldn't have the skirt going out in the back. You wouldn't have the correct silhouette. I mean, do whatever you want. You can if you want to, but if you're looking for a historically accurate, as best we can, silhouette, you have to wear the undergarments. I have not actively considered, oh, will this be flattering on me? I generally try to make garments and costumes that I think are beautiful. If I see an illustration of one or a painting or a movie and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need that gown, you know. I don't really say, will it look good on me? Now, we all know certain styles that don't look great on us. I mean, I would say like the Regency era, possibly not the most flattering for me. I mean, it's cinched here under the bust and then it's kind of flowy here. Not super flattering, but very comfortable. So I do not eschew the Regency era for that particular reason. Because if you're going to do historical costuming, that's probably one of the most comfortable time periods you can choose. Lots and lots of Google search, always. But yes, there are certain patterns and pattern companies that I do enjoy using their patterns. And the very first pattern that I bought for a historical costume was actually, I believe, for this walking skirt that I'm wearing. And it was from Laughing Moon Mercantile. And I really enjoyed working with it. It was easy to follow and it went up to my size, which I greatly appreciate, because if you are getting started in historical costuming, you will find that the big three companies, Butterick, Simplicity, McCall's, generally do not go up to the larger sizes. Now, they will say they are plus sizes. For example, this pattern says it's 16, 18, 20, 22, 24. And you might think, oh great, that's gonna fit me because I wear a size 22. Well, if you check your measurements, size 22 is a 44 bust, 37 waist, and 46 hip. So you generally have to size up quite a bit with patterns. My sister, my mother, both of my sisters and my mother, who don't have to shop in the plus sizes as I do, have to wear, I believe, like a size 20, make a size 20 pattern. So there you go. Always be careful. I have put together a list of patterns and pattern companies that I have used and would recommend, and I'm going to insert that right now. All right, so let's check out some plus size historical patterns. We're starting with Laughing Moon Mercantile. In the ladies' patterns, the top measurements, the largest measurements, are bust 54 inches, waist 46 inches, and hips 56 inches. For gentlemen, we have measurements of a chest measurement is 56 inches, waist measurement 50 inches, and hip measurement at 57 inches. Next we have Truly Victorian. The largest bust measurement is 56 inches, largest waist measurement 48 inches. All right, now let's check out Reconstructing History. For women, now they have a limited range of larger sizes. All of their patterns do not come in the largest sizes, but the ones that do, the bust measurement goes up to 60 inches, the waist up to 52, and the hips up to 62 for women's sizes. For men's sizes, the waist measurement goes up to 62 and the hips go up to 60. On to Scroop patterns. For ladies, we have a bust measurement up to 56 inches, a waist measurement up to 50 inches, and a hips measurement up to 60 inches. Now here's Red Threaded, and for the measurements there, we have bust up to 54 inches, waist up to 46 inches, and hips up to 56 inches. And here's the Mantua Maker. Bust measurement up to 62 inches, waist measurement up to 56, and hips measurement up to 64 inches. So a larger size range there, definitely. And on Etsy, you can find black snail patterns. And for those, we have, for ladies, a bust measurement up to 53 inches, waist measurement up to 47 inches, and hips measurement up to 55 inches. For gentlemen, we have a chest measurement of 52 inches, waist 47, and hips 53 inches. I try to buy patterns that come as close to my measurements as I can find. Often, even with the pattern companies that go up to larger sizes than the big three, I generally am either at the very top of the range or my measurements, like especially my waist measurement, is bigger than the highest or the largest size. So I know that I'm always going to have to most often make some adjustments to the fit. For an example of how I do that to accommodate my waist, I will show you right now. So the first thing you want to do when trying to make a pattern adjustment for width in the waist is to pin your pattern to your mock-up fabric. Next, you want to mark the cut where you're going to make the width adjustment. I made my mark 2 to 3 inches from the center front. I chose closer to the center front because the pattern piece curves up as it's going toward the side. Based on my measurements, I knew I needed 3 inches on both sides of the front. So I needed 6 total, and so I did 3 inches so that when I cut it out doubled, I would have those 6 inches. After I made the cut, I pinned it to some tracing paper. Well, actually, I used wrapping paper. The gridded wrapping paper works really well because those 1-inch marks are already there. Next, you're going to want to trace around the pinned fabric. And then you can cut out your new pattern piece. Transfer your pattern markings like grain line and boning channels, anything you need to, or notches, that kind of thing. Transfer those to the new pattern piece, and then you're ready to get working on your next mock-up. Like I said, I try to buy patterns that are as close to my measurements as I can get. I am not possessed of great mathing skills. So sizing up very small patterns into very large sizes is not something that I do. Now, if you are great at the math, you go for it and figure out how to do it. But it does take a lot of practice with pattern drafting and figuring out where you need to add the inches. My advice would be to start out with a pattern that comes in your size, if possible. If the pattern does not come in your size at all and you really want to try to make the garment, then start with a mock-up always. I've said this before, but start with a mock-up. At least the bodice, the thing that's going to give you the most trouble with the fit. And then once you make that mock-up, I would suggest go ahead and make it in the largest size that it comes in. If you're larger than the largest size, make it in the largest size that it comes in. Cheap fabric, you know. Doesn't matter if the pieces of fabric match, this is a mock-up, right? Any fabric will do. And see if you can put it on. And if you can't, then you know you're gonna have to size up every single piece, right? But if you put it on and the back is sitting fine, but the stomach doesn't have enough room, you know you need to add your inches in the front pieces or the side pieces. Sometimes it depends on the pattern. Sometimes you can just add a few inches in the side seams and that will give you what you need. Sometimes you have to do a full adjustment. So practice, practice, practice. I would say the biggest difference in plus sizes and straight sizes in general is the amount of fabric that you need. Now, if you're making a giant 18th century gown, then you're going to need a lot of fabric no matter what size you wear. But, you know, if you're a size 0, you could make a whole set of stays out of, you know, half a yard of fabric maybe. Whereas I cannot do that. So it is more expensive, definitely, generally speaking, as a plus size person, to sew garments for yourself because you have to buy more fabric. And that's just the truth of it. Also, some fabric widths you have to pay attention to. Some fabric widths are not wide enough to cut things on a fold. Like if you have a large skirt piece, you may not be able to get that entire skirt piece cutting on the fold of the fabric. But piecing is period, so you could always do that. I try to buy, when I'm buying fabric for costumes, I try to buy as wide a width of a fabric as I can get because I know that's just going to help me in the long run. I'm going to be able to lay out my pieces better. Another thing that can be frustrating if you wear large sizes is the cutting out process. Because the pieces are bigger, it takes longer, it's harder on your back. If you don't have a gigantic table, you can't lay the entire piece out because it doesn't fit on your table, that kind of things. But those are more annoyances than things that would make you not want to do it at all. So we do our best with what we have. If you're interested in plus size costuming, just do it. Just get started. Make something, even if it doesn't look great at first. We all start somewhere. No one starts sewing and makes something super fantastic, amazing their first go. That's just not humanity. That's just not how we work. Everything that we do when we're trying to make something and we're trying to make something well, it's all in practice. I'm a musician and I practice. I didn't start life being able to play the piano and sing. I practiced. I took lessons. And with sewing, it's just practice. It's taking classes or watching all of these amazing CoCoVid videos to give you some tips and tricks, or learn something new, or, you know, watch some more YouTube videos or read people's blogs who sew, and just get started. Do your best, and at the end of the day, you will be happy with what you make. Maybe not the first time, maybe not even the second time, but it will happen for you. And you might be so amazed, and not even might, you will be so amazed at the things that you can create. And that is the best part of historical sewing. And hello! Hey, Thor! You can come here. You can come. You're my buddy. You're my buddy. Expressing your creativity is one of the most rewarding things. And I hope that you will start your sewing adventures and join me in historical costuming for plus sizes. If you have any questions about any of the things that I've covered today, please put them in the comments below, and I will try to answer everything as much and as best as I can. I am not a professional seamstress. I'm not a professional sewist. Is that a word? I'm a professional musician, so sewing is a hobby for me, but I love it, and I love making costumes. And if I can help you, I want to help you. So please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time on our sewing adventures.